All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Microsoft Team Superheroes. Very, very excited for the group that we have today. Again, we're going to be talking about centers of excellence and how to manage applications, both existing, first-party, third-party applications that are available for you in Teams on day one, all the way to incredible custom solutions that some of the organizations we're going to be speaking to have built for their Microsoft Teams experience. Real quick though, before we get started, want to call out a couple of things. If you weren't aware, and if this is your first Teams live event, Q&A is live. So feel free to ask anything that you like. We'll either respond to you directly, given the context of the question, or we'll post it live and share it for others to see. This will be recorded, and we will share with you afterwards. So we'll put this video up on YouTube so everybody has access to it. This is not a marketing event. So your email address is not in any marketing funnel of sorts. So we will send you a follow-up email to give you access to the resources and some key links, but don't worry, you're not going to get a bunch of spam from us after this event. And today really is about addressing common questions that we've been hearing from you and your peers around the world. We've had a lot of organizations ask us about managing custom solutions, particularly in Microsoft Teams and applications in Teams. And we wanted to address it from some of the best. And I'm so excited from some of the speakers that you're going to hear today. Before I introduce them, just real quick call out to myself and Pawan, who and I are we're peers that work on the global customer success team for Microsoft. We're going to be your co-hosts and moderators and passing back and forth between us today and having some fun. Pawan, if you want to say hello to everybody, unless you're on mute, then I can just pass through.
Hello, everyone.
Thanks,
Good
man.
morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone based on where you're joining from, and excited about this session.
Excited to have you, man. And then our superheroes who are joining us today. What an unbelievable group of people. And I'm not saying that just because we have them on the event. We've been planning this for a couple of months, and I'm so excited to have this group here because it's a very diverse group of experiences when it comes to this concept of managing applications and teams in the center of excellence. But we've got Ron and Tom from Wiley in New York. We've got Satish coming in from Accenture, and then we have Joe and David from our own internal group at Microsoft. Some incredible folks. We're going to get to all of them here in a second and hear their journeys and their stories on how they built their center of excellence, which we found out not all of them necessarily call it that, how they think about governance of these applications within teams and what their operational models look like. So you'll get a great diverse perspective today. Real quick, a quick background before we get in and give it over to the superheroes and let them talk about what they're doing. Wanted to set some background on why we're here. And again, address these questions that we're hearing from so many organizations around the planet who we're humbled in your investment in Microsoft Teams, but a lot of you are asking us as well, is that, look, we love this idea of allowing people to use and build these solutions that we've already given them to improve how they work. But the challenge that we have as we start to enable this concept of citizen development or even full-fledged development and everything in between is who's going to support these solutions if they break, right? Or if the code goes bad, or if there's an update that comes in and we need to update and we need to adjust the solution itself. Who's going to make sure that these solutions also adhere to our organizational security and compliance guardrails to make sure that the information that is being accessed by these applications stays within the realm of our corporate network? And what happens if these creators of these applications leave our organization? What happens if thousands of people start leveraging this application and the creator decides to go work somewhere else? So how do you actually manage this whole process? And again, while not every organization calls it a center of excellence, this is the common term that we're hearing right now. And in a lot of organizations, the way this simply works for most is how do you connect your IT organization with your users and leveraging the technology they have? And by setting up this intermediary of sorts, or this conduit that works with all different organizations and business groups within the realm of that organization itself, to look after all of these components of what the center of excellence might look like. But really setting up this boundaries that determine who can publish when and where, thinking about the entire end-to-end process and the framework for building these solutions to these business scenarios. And that's exactly what a lot of the folks you're going to hear from today have built in various degrees within their organization. And so not any one of them is going to be the perfect example of a center of excellence. You're going to hear this great diverse group of folks from all these organizations who have built something that works given the context of their organization and their culture, et cetera. So with that, I'm going to kick over with our first question here. We're going to get over to the superheroes. And Satish, if it's okay with you, we'll start with you over at Accenture. But before, as you were looking at building this concept of this center of excellence, or whatever it is that you all call it internally, but how you govern applications, what was your objective in the first place? Like, where did you actually even begin thinking about that this was needed and this was something that you were going to deliver for your organization?
Sure. So, Hejesh, thanks for putting this first question to me. And good morning, good afternoon, evening to everyone. From my point of view, from Accenture, we started with our entire experience, what we had for Skype for Business time. We were on-prem Skype for Business, a big deployment. So when we have started our journey towards team, this third-party application, our bots or custom apps was one of the big topic for us. So we have started with the thinking that what we can do better, what we don't have in the Skype time. So three pillars of the thinking. First was that how we can help our developer. Second, how we can govern and maintain and control all the application or bots which are running in our environment. And the third is the most important as well, like how we are going to give a better experience to our end user. So for the first one, like how to help our developer, we know that a lot of opportunity, a lot of options we have in Teams for development point of view. So first thing what we did, we have consolidated entire process at one place. Like we have just collected the information, we talked internally with different teams, our internal info security team, data privacy, legal, procurement, and we understand their requirement, and we have created a one view of the entire process, and we publish that internally for our development team, so they can view everything what they need to do from one place. Second part, what we have started thinking that, okay, now if we are start seeing a lot of applications, bots or custom apps are going to publish or coming requests to us, how we are going to track and maintain that. So we have created some internal process. We develop a form which we publish for our developer that here you need to start that your request process. And once you will complete your request process, we took an internal review with our internal team, which is mostly like our technical team, to understand the feasibility, what would the impact on the infrastructure if there is any. Then we took that to our next level, and that entire review process gives us a feeling that, okay, whatever we are publishing, we know that who is requesting, who is the user, and how to maintain and keep a track of these apps. And the third point is for user, we know that like a lot of applications are in market which has overlap with their features and functionality. Similar thing for bots. So what we have did on that side, like we don't want a multiple options available for users just with the same kind of service, which may confuse them. So we took another stance in there, like before we go and publish anything, we make sure that it's not too much duplicate, too much overlap. So these are the three major pillar points for our thinking to how to develop this entire process.
That's great. So a lot of that driven out of your move from Skype for Business and to almost maintain, not that you'd call it this, but the status quo of the experience that you had, and then to improve that and really enable folks to continue on it, right?
Yes, and just like how to make sure that all the apps, bots, what running, we have a very good visibility, like what is the purpose, who is using, who is supporting. So in the case of we need to reach out to anyone, we have all the information with us.
I appreciate that, Satish. And again, we're very excited to have you. I might follow in line here and ask Ron and Tom from Wiley to maybe share sort of where you guys started in the process and your business objective, if you will, with creating the organization that you guys look after.
Sure. I'll start. The way we started our Center of Excellence was completely organic. It wasn't a planned, crafted division, and from the beginning, the core team that makes up our Center of Excellence has never been in the same department. We have people from throughout the organization that come together to form different working groups based on the needs of those working groups. So it's a very different model than I think what I understand from Accenture's approach, which is kind of interesting, I guess.
That's, yeah, you guys have heard me say this a bunch of times, but just for the sake of the audience, I think that's the beauty of the diversity of the three organizations we have here. Is, you know, I was saying this to Satish yesterday, but Accenture has this unbelievable and not that I call it complex, so forgive me for using this word, Satish, but a very intricate model that you built. And Wiley, you guys started this originally from seeing a need, right? And it was more, let's build it as we go. And then Microsoft, I'd say, is somewhere kind of in the middle of both. And I think it's so refreshing to see all three of these perspectives, because there's no right or wrong. I mean, this at the end of the day, and you know, Tom and Ron, you guys and I have geeked out on this a bunch of times, but so much of it comes down to the culture of your organization and what it is you're trying to achieve in the first place. So I find the different take very refreshing from you guys. So appreciate that. Can I ask real quick though? One thing we spoke about before I pass over to Joe and David on Microsoft is this concept of governance. And you guys have a different way potentially of thinking about it internally at Wiley. Would you maybe share some thoughts on what that means to you guys in the context of the way that you manage these technology solutions? You know, Microsoft aside for a second, and the way that you look at it end to end. Sure.
So, I mean, because our team is small, we don't have. There's basically Ron and I are leading the efforts. We really have to look to the business as partners in terms of helping. With governance and even development. So when a team does come to us and say, hey, we need, you know, we have a need, you know, for whatever, they become part of the team itself. And so using, I mean, we've really relied heavily on some of our projects on kind of like a light or modified agile development methodology. And then we bring in these representatives from the business, make them part of the project team. And so as we're building it and working, they're understanding exactly how it works, what's going into it, so that when it's done and we hand off the app or, you know, the product, they're basically the owners. They know how to use it. They know how to move forward with it. And if they need to, they can engage us at any time. So that's kind of how we've approached it, because, you know, again, limitations on resources with the two of us. So we really have to look to the organization to help us out.
And to that point, if I can add on to that, part of that process that we've developed, because the people from throughout the business are part of the project team in development, we get to understand what their capabilities are, and the product can be built in a way that the governance is possible for them. So we don't ever end up building something that they just can't possibly maintain or handle on their own. You know, so that way we can drop back into a consultant role without being tied to that product for the rest of its life.
I love it. I love you guys, the skin in the game from the business group. I know, you know, Microsoft, the productivity studio, Microsoft also takes a fairly similar approach that we'll get to on the operational model when we get to that here in a sec. But no, appreciate it, gents. And again, absolutely a pleasure to have you guys. Our second one of these doing it together. So it's very much a pleasure to get you on here again. And thank you for gracing us with your presence. And then, absolutely. And if I may, Joe and David, do you guys maybe want to walk us through the background on your objective when it came to the productivity studio at Microsoft and how we run our COE?
Yeah. Hey, Jace. Bon.
Hey.
Yeah, so we've really grown with the product stack. And when I say the product stack, the O365 stack, it really started back in 2015 as we, as a company, started migrating from on-prem to online into the cloud. And so as part of that, right, the SharePoint on-prem farms, moving those over into the SharePoint Online process really kind of helped us to centralize that in the IT organization, and that's where David and I both sit, to help those business groups really kind of move in the right direction, which has gotten us to where we are and where the company is able to support that longer term, both internally and externally. But as the products grew, as the product stack actually grew, it really kind of exploded, and we've been basically developing the studio, the productivity studio, with that product stack as it has grown, with all the different products that have been created as part of that. And by us actually working with all the different business groups across Microsoft, it really helps us get a good view of what's being asked for and what needs to be built as part of that. By having the productivity studio, right, it really allows us to build and help those business groups build those, nice, simple product or solutions for those business groups to enable their business processes, right? Going from these single applications to now on to a full-on solution and working differently with things like Teams, etc.
Yeah, and I'd add to that. I think some of it is a selfish interest from an IT perspective, that it's a matter of skill. Like I think for many years, as we've worked with SharePoint and gone to cloud, and this whole journey we've been on, I think we've seen that businesses have sometimes overbuilt solutions or built the wrong way, and IT was left holding the bag to say, hey, we need to support this thing, or there's a security implication here or some privacy implication there, and IT has to come in and kind of save the day. And I think what we kind of saw was that was an unsustainable model for us, and we wanted to kind of get in front of that in a lot better way, to have this additional level of consulting to make sure that we're helping business from the get-go to say, you want to go build a solution, let's help you do it in a product aligned way. Here's the simplest possible way for you to build the solution. Obviously customize the product before you then build on it. Use simple tools like a Power Platform where you can, of course, as well. And then, of course, you need to go further, then build a bot, build an actual part, and a SharePoint framework solution, for example, in helping our businesses kind of think through that model and help them in cases where they couldn't do it themselves, actually helping them build those solutions.
It's a great ad, and I, funny enough, had the same conversation with Tom and Ron over at Wiley, and seeing some of the applications before this was created, and the solutions that organizations have built aren't necessarily always the right solution. As they come in to the initial consultation with this idea of what they want, but then you start asking some certain questions, and that really evolves the scenario itself and the solution that they want to deliver. So, great background there. Puan, I'll pass over to you if you want to take the next one here.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we'll go to Joe and David, since you are guys off mute. You started to talk a little bit about your operating model. Let's peel the onion a little bit here, and maybe start with something basic. I, as a Microsoft employee, have a great idea, and I need to figure out how to build the app. Maybe I can build one if I have the skills. Maybe I need some help. How do I find you guys? And what's the steps? What's the next step I take in order to kind of engage with you?
Yeah, and we'll get into a little bit of that in the next slides with the operational model, but we do have an intake form, right, that anybody in the company can actually come and ask for that type of help on. We provide a bunch of different services as part of that, both from a self-servicing perspective and or if they need deeper help, right, we can provide those different types of services with suppliers if required. And also with that, right, with the guidance, right, of our tenant admins, right, and architectural reviews, etc., right, they can actually come to us, get that guidance, make sure that they're building it, per the governance and the security guidelines that we provide out to help really guide them through that process.
And we have a lot of this collateral on our IT portals, and we provide the best practices of getting going, guidance. But we also have, so there's the proactive to make sure we've got all the information out there so people can find us and reach out and fill in the forms that Joe talked about. But then there's also the reactive catch to say, you know what, you didn't know about us, you never found us, you never sought us out. I mean, we are a big organization, and you build something, you want to get in the catalog. Well, to get in the catalog, you're going to come to us anyways, and then you're going to, in a reactive way, go through our processes, and we're going to try to help basically update what you've done to get it into the catalog appropriately. Or if you're simply trying to do an app consent, for example, against a graph, again, same thing. You're going to come through our processes, but we're going to have to approve what you're doing anyways. So we're going to catch you by the time you try to get your thing into production. And so it's a matter of the earlier you come to us, the more simple it's going to be.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I presume, going to Ron and Tom here from Wiley, I presume the process looks a little different for you. As you said, the business groups come to you and they're effectively part of your group. How does that process work? Do you then upskill those users? You said you look at their skills and work with them. What if they come to you with an idea but don't have the dev skills? And perhaps this is citizen development happening, meaning using no code or low code platforms. Perhaps they need something more invasive or more complex, like you're leveraging Azure bot framework or Azure services. How do you bring them along and get that concept from ideation to delivery?
Yeah, that's the real challenge, right? Like, how do you bring it all the way through the life cycle and ensure that it's built in a sustainable way? Mostly from the outset, we've done a pretty good job of building a community through our Yammer network where people know how to get a hold of us, how to ask questions, and how to reach out. And so that's a big source of our Office 365 activity. For larger scale projects, that usually comes through the business directly to us. So I mentioned before that we're in different areas of the business. I'm in communications platform, and Tom is in collaboration tools and productivity. So between those two areas, we have a pretty good network throughout the company for people to get a hold of us. And fortunately, when we started, I mentioned we started in a pretty organic way. That fortunately we were closely aligned with IT at that time, and so that foundation and that connection was there from day one. But to your second point about how do we make sure that that the people throughout the business or in a shared service or whatever, how they are able to sustain it, that's really through at the core, the beginning of the project, where we're assessing the final goal of what should be built. Oftentimes, people will have an idea of what they need, and so they'll come with a solution, and they'll say, "This is what we need you to do." And really, the first step is to assess the problem and kind of readdress it and reframe the problem in a way that maybe they didn't see before. And maybe the solution that they had proposed is the actual solution that's needed, but oftentimes that's not the case. Oftentimes, they're just not necessarily aware of the full breadth and scope of what's possible. When you start to explain things, you start to pick things apart, you arrive at a more streamlined solution, and something that, where they might have thought that it was something they just needed somebody to build and hand off to them, and then they realize, like, oh wait, we can actually do this. This is something we understand. So part of it is really just that procedural exercise of getting people to know what the problem is, as opposed to just the solution that they want someone else to build.
Yeah, what we like to do is, when we start our very first conversation, people try to say, "Oh, I want a SharePoint site," or "I need this," and we try to take technology off the table. Like, let's not talk about solutions. Let's not talk about what the tools that we have. Let's just talk about the process. What is your end goal? What do you want? What do you want to build? What do you want to have in the hands of your customer? Whether that's an internal customer or maybe even an external customer. But and by listening to them and just talking, the conversations can take a vastly different turn. They may have come to us saying, "Oh, we just want a website," and then we end up building an app and Power Apps. But it's through that, as we move down through that process and that journey, and this is addressing that another part of the question, which is about upskilling. That's all definitely part of it. Through that, teams, business people from the business may not know. I mean, Wiley is, we're still kind of early on in our Office 365 journey, and so, like, some of them, something basic like a SharePoint list, they might not know about, and through the building process of them being part of the team, they learn all about that. They learn about the technology, and they learn how it works. And so by the time we release the final product, they're they're all proud of themselves. Like, oh, I'm an expert in this now, and that's part of it. You know, we like to walk away and knowing that, you know, these people who didn't know about certain aspects of the 365 suite or other tools are now not only users of it, but almost become evangelists of it on their own, and thus educating other people on their teams about it. And it just kind of helps spread the word and helps the technology spread.
What an amazing way of spreading digital transformation, right? Not only have you put your consultant hats on, as you said earlier, and guided them through the process, you actually taught them how to fish. You've shown them the power of the platform. You've made them believers in that. And then you've shown them the way to get to that end delivery that they were looking for that solution they were looking for to solve that business need. And in that process, created more evangelists. So maybe they can go out and they're part of your virtual COE. They go out and help others that are looking at similar challenges and looking to build similar solutions. So awesome stuff.
Do you mind if I ask real quick on the Accenture side?
Yes.
Because I mean, this is such a great conversation, and alternatively, why we really wanted to have Accenture here as well is Satish. Forgive me if I don't explain this properly or in your language, but when I think about what you guys do, just in layman's terms, is you ask the individual developers, whether those are folks who are building their own solution for teams, you know, full-fledged developers or citizen devs, everything in between. You get them to work with their local support teams. What you guys have done is created sort of the governance and the operational model about how to enable these applications, both from a third-party perspective and a custom perspective in the team's experience. Is that a fair way to explain it?
Yeah, it's more or less the same story. So in our case, the team which manage, like my team, we are part of that engineering and deployment team who manage that entire teams overall as a service. So what we have taken approach that rather to going to be as a development scale and guiding them for development part, we have focused on the process, like all the developer, like we have a diversified development team, like different regional, different geography, they have their own requirement, and we're not going to do anything or blocking or like policing them to do like this way or other way. What we did that, okay, you were coming with the ideas that you want to develop something which you want to integrate in the teams. You need to start with the certain process which will help you, me, and our users. So we have given them a platform where they can submit a request for us to review that, like what they want to develop, what is the purpose of that application, how that's going to help their business and all. We took all those detail and we go to our internal team, review that internally. We give them feedback that, oh, it's going to work, it's approved or not approved with some logic reason. We took that to our CIO leadership to get their blessing if it is required, or if we have something which is not matching with our certain defined standard. Post that approval, we guide them how to get the sign off from our InfoSec or data privacy team. So it will be comply with our Accenture standard. It will comply with your local standard, different geography, different local rules. So once we have passed through that security review and the legal and data privacy, this two goes in parallel. Like sometime they go one first, second first, but mostly this both goes in parallel. Once they have the approval from both the side, that's the time when we start enabling those bots. For example, if we take an example of bots, enabling that bot in our staging environment, giving them access of our staging tenant, so they can start playing and test it, like how it works, and give that some more access to their certain pilot users. Once that has done, we promote that bots to our production tenant. At particular that time, that bots will be available for all the users and their projects, and they start using that. So our entire focus is like I was listening other like our team member here, like they are more guiding them in the development framework. Someone's guiding in the process. We are just facilitating them to walk through the entire Accenture internal process. At the same time, some development team like who comes to us, hey, we want to develop like this kind of things, and we don't have much idea. So we try to connect them with the other team who already developed such bots, and that's help them to understand like what all they need to do to get it done. So we are just in middle of facilitating that entire process to comply with Accenture, plus guiding them with the previous developed apps or bots.
That's great, Satish. So on that too, is anything you want to call out? So I just had the bots up on the screen, but when you look at the difference in the process between third party and bots, anything worth calling out on here?
Yeah, so the one major difference is what we have between bots and third-party apps, because many of the apps required licenses. So if you see this entire process at a very high level, the major difference in this section and bots is the procurement. Like if you go in the fourth box, which we have. So when we go through that review process, we approve that. If they required a license, we redirect them to the procurement team. They work with the procurement team. They provide all the details. They help procurement team help them to obtain the license, procure the number of licenses what they required. And once they have that, let's drive that into next all the process like review with the security team, data privacy. But the bottom line, like they need a license, and that goes through the procurement team. Once they got that license procured and approval, we enable that apps and publish this into our catalog. The second call out in this process, like for example, if we published one app and that has done by the project XYZ, and then tomorrow if some other projects want to use the same application, they need to start the process. They will see that, oh, this is already published. So they don't need to go through that entire review process like legal or security, but they need a license because the license has been procured by the previous project when it was enabled first time for their project. So if they need a license, we just put them to the in front of procurement team, but they don't need to go through that entire review process because this has already done. And we keep publishing the list of apps and bots which already published for our users. So whenever you're going to fill out a form, you will see that, okay, what all are already published. If it is already there, okay, I need to start from here rather to go through the entire review process.
It's fantastic, and love seeing this. I really appreciate you taking the time to kind of walk us through this here. Ipwan, did you want to? I know you had a couple questions you wanted to kick off.
Yeah, no, actually, I mean, this sparked off another question here. I wanted to go back to Wiley. Perhaps Ron or Tom, you can take this. As I look through this process, and as Satish talks about how they take that app, take it from kind of ideation to development, and then they have a looks like you have a catalog where people can discover what apps are there. How do you do that at Wiley? As you're working with your business users and you're building something out, how do other business users now find out that an app like that exists? And how do you certify or validate those apps before you publish them out?
That's a tough one.
By the way, the answer might be we don't, which I think is also hugely valuable.
But yeah, I think it goes back to what Jace was saying earlier. The ideal COE for any organization is the COE that works for you. It's the process that works for you, and you may not be doing it. But again, that's a valid answer.
Yeah, well, we do to certain degrees and in certain ways. But so to your point about discoverability, a lot of what we do is crafted for a very specific purpose for a very specific department. So, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but one of the biggest projects we've done lately is a career pathing, custom career pathing app for our HR group to help explain our job architecture and career paths that employees can take to help with employee retention and employee development. Yeah. So that's a thing that's like a very specific use for a very specific user. So our first task is to make sure that it works for the HR department, so that the HR department can use it within the HR department to understand how they're structuring our job architecture. And once, so that's a limited audience. So we don't really need to push that out to the entire company until HR is ready to start explaining that and having those conversations, with the whole enterprise at enterprise level. And then once we clear that first hurdle, what we did in that particular case is we launched that app in Teams so that it could be one click away from any user, whether they wanted to explore it on their own because it was open to all employees, or whether it wanted to be put into a team itself for a discussion within a team or department or a working group or something like that. So we use Teams in that example, and in a lot of examples, to help distribute the apps that we create to the general public. Did I leave anything out, Tom?
No, I mean, I'd add, another way that we get apps out there is they become replacements for existing forms or processes or whatnot. Yeah, that's about it. I
think a good example of that is it's one of our most recent ones. We used to have a really onerous process for our employee gift matching. So if you make a donation to a verified charity, our company has a policy where you can get funds matched. And previously that was we're jumping ahead, but that was a very complicated combination of online and offline processes, and so the app and then the process we created to solve for that just replaced the existing process. So people were already aware of how to go about doing it, but the application that we developed replaced an old created thing.
Got it. And I know, as you said, we've got a slide or two coming up that talks to those pieces, so we'll get into it. I actually want to go back to Joe and David from Microsoft and perhaps ask you the same question. As people come to you, as you're building solutions or helping them build solutions, what happens next from a discoverability standpoint, from a solution verification or certification standpoint? How do we go from we built something to now people are aware of it and they're actively using it?
Sure, thanks, Juan. Prior to that process, right, again, we have that intake form. It's called Front Desk. It really allows people to come and get self-servicing, because we definitely want to try to allow our business groups to build those applications bots on their own. If as part of that, we also point folks out to documentation along with, as Wiley was noting, right, to our Yammer communities, right, which also have our product group folks in those communities to help understand and give guidance as part of that. And then if it goes further, right, then they build their applications and bots. I'll let David speak to what our process is internally here at Microsoft.
Yeah, so if someone either goes through Front Desk first of all and gets a consultation and kind of architectural conversation, or if they simply build themselves, we have a app submission process called the publish apps, as we call it, which is where they fill in the solution that we basically does a detection logic to say what kind of solution is this. It collects basic information like, have you gone through security review, who owns this, who is the business approver, all that basic stuff, and then it comes back to us for application review before publish it in the app catalog. And at the end of the day, what we're really looking for is this a threat to our tenancy in some way? Is this developer doing the thing the right way, reasonably? Are there any performance implications we're going to have to be concerned about? Those are things we'll think about as we're going to put the application in the catalog, because it fundamentally comes down to, is this going to be putting us as a tenant at risk in some way? And are we helping business do the right thing here? Because in many cases, the business has just gone off and either hired someone or done some self-engineering. We want to enable that where it makes sense, but we just want to make sure that we can be careful about what's being delivered and that tenancy is not going to get impacted by it.
So this is a great point. So you're just touching on the third-party apps there, and it's thank you so much for sharing it too transparently, David. Like Joe, one thing I found really interesting about our model, though, is where it changes right here compared to the other two organizations that we have here, and is that you guys bring in a partner in order to deliver some of these solutions and create a sale of work. And could you maybe talk through that whole process and why you guys went down that route?
Yeah, we've brought in a few suppliers, right? Where we've gone through, certified them. They work very closely with our tenant admins, with our architects, right? Making sure again that the things that we're building are not only looking at where our product stack is currently, but where is it going, right? We live in a dog food environment, which is really, really it's challenging at times, right? As you build out these solutions, and staying up with the products, with the betas that are actually being released, and trying to be really forward thinking. And with our certified suppliers, right, we get that partnership, and our businesses also reap the rewards, right, of getting not only what's currently there, but what's coming at them, and building it in a way that will last a longer span than what some folks currently build under and may not have that insight to.
Yeah, I think this comes down to, it's a scale factor for us. That, look, we know full well there's lots of business solutions that need to get built by some business across Microsoft that doesn't have capacity, if engineering wise, or the know-how to go do the right thing. And we've kind of done this pre-qualification, as Joe said, for suppliers that we know will do the right thing and won't, I guess, add too much to it. Like, one of the challenges we've seen is sometimes you go bring in an external consultant, and they'll kind of try to do 100% of all the business asks, and they'll build the perfect solution that needs every little thing that business could have dreamed of, but it's going to cost an arm and a leg, and it's going to be hard to support, and it's not going to be well product aligned. And so what we've done is said, okay, we're going to bring in suppliers who are going to be very focused on building the simplest possible, easy to support solution that's aligned to the strategies that we're talking about here. Build the citizen development where possible, build simple development on Teams and SharePoint where we can, and follow that model where it makes sense. And so that's kind of where we've been bringing in these suppliers to help our businesses scale, pre-vetted, to make sure they're doing the right thing.
That's awesome. And so I might take and again, I can't say thank you enough times for sharing all this so candidly with all of us. And Satish, I might pop back over to you, because now that we've covered, why you got started and the operational model that you all run, is thinking about how your organization and your team looks at impact. And maybe if I might ask, someone had a great question. As a part of your impact, what is that average length of time that it might take in order, from your guys' perspective, given the model's slightly different compared to Wiley and Microsoft, what's the average time it takes to get through these applications and these custom solutions and have them approved for teams, if you guys have looked at an average?
That's a good question. There's two parts in this. Like, one is the development. So that's entirely with the development team. So like how much time they need to develop. And in this entire process, what we did, one more thing, we have given them a guideline and document that while you're waiting for that entire review with the data privacy, legal, security, which usually takes some time because of that long queue of the different application review, we provide them access of development tenant, which is a free Microsoft tenant. So you can start with there. So you don't need to wait for that entire review done, and then you can show that like how it works. So you can do that part done. And then once you are done with this assessment and ready for publish, we go and give it to the staging environment to start that formal testing and all. So in general, we have seen like 3 to 4 weeks time when they have start that entire review process. And by the time it's part done, they are already have tested, they have already captured the detail, like how it work, what all enhancement need or some gap. So we just try to overlap this lead time, which is 3 to 4 weeks, which usually took the time for the review. We try to utilize that time for testing. So I would say that it's like in a parallel work for the 3 to 4 weeks for an each application, considering they have the concept ready, they have a concept for development and all are working. So it's very tough to measure, but we see that this way, like, okay, it's took about 3 to 4 weeks time frame. The time they submit the request to us and the time by the time it's promoted to our production tenant.
Awesome, thanks, Satish. And then, is there anything you want to talk through on the impact here, and in terms of how you guys sort of measure the impact of your organization in the broader context of Accenture?
Right. So our part is like how we're measuring our impact is more like how much governance and control we have on those entire process. So like we know that our developer is well aware. They know that what is that, how to develop an application, bots and all that part. So the major challenge which we had in our organization, considering our scale and all, like how to keep a control on that application and how to help them to publish that as soon as or as early we can. So the biggest impact which we see in this part, like as of now, we have more than 100 plus apps and bots running in our environment, and they have a huge impact on the users' ability to communicate and get the answers what they're looking. And we have seen this part, like by the time we have implemented this process, it took initially took time to start and socializing this. But the ones that socialize, we have seen that first the process is streamlined for the developer and requester. They have a very defined guidelines, so they are happy with that. Plus, we have seen that in a short span of time, like within a few months, we have completed this development and published of this 100+ bots and apps. And that's all we know that, okay, who is the requester? We have that entire visibility, like who is the requester, who has created this, what was their scope. And we have noticed that time to time, like sometimes we have seen that some deviation in the scope, what they have defined and how it is working. And we have a very good hold on that. We easily catch that. And we go back to them and understand that, okay, it is something we missed in the capturing that detail, or is something you have changed recently. So our biggest impact is like how we are control, like the amount of control which we have on now in the apps and bots. This was not in past. So this is our biggest takeaway from this entire process.
It's pretty incredible too, 100 different bots and apps in the team's experience. Can I ask on that real quick? And it's a little off topic here on the impact, but it's such an important point that comes up is then you have a bunch of separate bots for separate use cases, which given the usage stats that you guys have, obviously they're still incredibly valuable. But how do you think then about the experience and reducing some of the complexity on which app to use when?
So that's the one part which we took in our review process. So for example, that HR bot, HR policy is very much a regional based policy. And we see that, okay, some policy, which HR policy we have in India, that doesn't apply to that Philippines, doesn't apply to the US. So our goal is that we can try to eliminate that number of bots which has this kind of overlap if we can do, but where we can't do, we still have to keep, like HR bots is an example where we need a different HR bot for the different reason. So our next goal, which we have at this time, like how to simplify that, and is it something we can ask and work with the development team? So they can give that one bot, but based on that user location and user geography, it respond accordingly. So as of now, that's our biggest challenge as well. But at the same time, we have already tried to filter out by going with their use case, scope, and removing that if there is some overlap. We have seen a lot of bots coming, like technical tech bot. We had a number of bots or request at least. Where we have seen that, okay, you can merge this in the two bots together. You don't need a separate bot. And that's where we are just trying to simplify this for our users. But at certain level, we see that we have some overlap and we need to do more work on that side.
That's great. And Satish, if I may, one more on this is Puan actually was just asking this question on the back, and I think it's a great one, is what would be the alternative for these 100+ apps and bots if this formal model you guys have in place right now that you've championed wasn't there? I mean, is there dollar savings achieved compared to this traditional IT development that you'd have before, or if you had to bring in external consultants and vendors? Has that discussion come up internally?
So we had that discussion, like what we can do, and if we do not have this process, what is that impact? And we had this experience, like Skype time. We had this everything, like most of these bots were running that time. In fact, we had more bots in Skype than what we have today. But the major challenge for our developer and users plus our group as well, like all three pillars which we have for developer was the biggest challenge, that they need to go through number of different groups to get that approval process. There was no something like it's I would say like it's on the different pieces, but it was not very well connected from the application point of view. So usually they used to come to us, hey, I want to publish this bot. So where do we need to go to get that review process? And we need to point them in a different process. So that's the biggest one for our developer by this implementing this process, that they don't need to go and look multiple documents and the sites and the internal team to get all the detail. Now they have all the details at one site, like our internal Microsoft Team support site. They are getting all the information there. So this is a big saving of time for them. Then second part is for our group who manage this entire infrastructure. We don't had a very good list in past, like, okay, what are the purpose of this bot? Who has requested? What time is renewed? So that part was not there. So for us now with this process, it's helping us to keep that track. And that's the biggest, one of the biggest help for admin and our tenant grow, admin plus our engineering team. And then for the users, now we have a very defined catalog. Like, okay, if you have anything from HR related in India, this is the bot which is for you. If you want help on the tech support, this is the bot for you. If you want some help for something like a project related task in managing the project and all, this is the bot for you. So this is the 3 level of different kind of help which we find by implementing this process, and we are helping everyone in this way.
That's great to teach. Thanks so much. And just in the essence of time, might be real quick on the Wiley and Microsoft side, but Ron and Tom, maybe when you guys think about impact, and I'm not sure if there's anything you want to call out particularly, but I currently circling a couple of things in terms of the solutions you guys have delivered in that current shift to remote work. But anything that comes to mind when you guys think about the impact you made and all the great work you've done?
Wow, where to begin?
I don't know if there's anything we can speak to specifically about solutions for remote work, but in terms of just impact of our efforts over the past, say, 2 years and how that plays into remote work. I mentioned before that we had started as pretty much a volunteer group that evolved into really a cornerstone of Wiley's digital collaboration model. And because of that, now the reputation that we've built over the last few years, now that we're in this COVID-19 world where there is a drive for, like, what does digital work look like, and how does digital work, how does truly digital work differentiate itself from analog work using digital tools or analog work using digital behaviors? And because we've done this laid this groundwork over the last 2 years, Tom and I have both been included at the highest level for helping to make those decisions and shape what that future might look like. And we're still working through that process, and there's a lot of other people involved throughout the company. But I think it's a testament to what we've done that we're included in that process.
Look, yeah, you guys are both very humble. I appreciate that for sure. But I've had conversations with you guys quite a bit, and what I find so fascinating, and not that this isn't happening from Accenture and Microsoft perspective as well, but so much of what you guys are doing is driving a cultural shift internally on the way that you, to your point earlier, approach technology and the way that people are using that technology. And I think that goes without saying is what every center of excellence is doing, but you're forcing the hard conversations, and a lot of it's coming as a result of the work that you guys are doing. So, I mean, I love the perspective, and again, always appreciate you guys sharing that. So, love your work.
If I may,
yeah.
just one real quick.
Oh, please.
But prior to Wiley, prior to this sort of career I've had now, I spent a lot of time in the entertainment industry, and there was a saying in the entertainment industry that fads come from the top down, but trends come from the bottom up.
So, Ron, are you saying that we're trendsetters?
We're trendsetters. That's what I'm saying. I'll pat myself on the back over here.
Yeah, and Jace, I don't know if we have time, but you talked about or circled that one of our favorite tools, and I just want to hit on, Ron talked about our career path tool earlier. But one thing that we've really gotten a lot of mileage out in our current environment. We have here listed a matching gift tool. So Wiley is really generous in that any employee that generates in the U.S. that donates to a 501(c) charity, Wiley will match up to a certain amount. And we had a horrible process previously about how do you verify the charity and can we give to this, can we match to it, and we worked with the team in the same process that we had before, and they're part of the project team and whatnot. And we came up with this great new solution that actually is really timely right now, and that's this new matching gift kind of application where it verifies automatically based on a third-party charity database, and we've also pushed that out to the organization, and the way that employees are really using it and loving it. It's really helped to speed up the donation process, but also again shows what the platform can do through what was a horrible form before is now this really great automated process, and it's really helping to open up people's eyes to say, wow, we can do this. And yeah, the answer is yes, we can.
Awesome. Love it, guys. As much as I'm really shattered that we're probably not going to have time, so we only have 4 minutes left to show all these solutions, I'm thinking what we might do, just given the audience and the importance of this conversation, is that's not the right slide, sorry, is pop into advice for your peers, and if you had to start this whole process over, what you'd think about and what advice you give to them. And I might start, Joe, with you and David on looking back, the advice you'd give to folks here.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jace. So looking back, and how we've gotten here, it's and every organization is going to be different in their journey, right? Of where they're at with their technology and their relationships with their business. But with what we've gotten to, where we've come from and where we've gotten to, again, kind of goes back to the stack itself and how we've really built the trust and the relationships across the company to give that breadth and depth, right, that everybody's looking for, and bringing these communities together, right? One of the solutions that we've built out is around speaking engagements for our executive leaders, right, that do that. We've changed the way that they've actually their offices are working today, where they were working in these single applications in Excel, Word. We're now innovating and bringing to the forefront teams first, right, in that, and removing the individual emails and bringing that to life with the transparency and a single repository, right, for everybody to work differently, and with a Power App that provides the insights, right? So again, we're now at the stage of building this with 5 to 7 different applications, which is just earth-shattering. But again, right, looking back at our journey, right, we would have never gotten here without the product stack and kind of bringing our stakeholders, right, with us to really build that foundation that we're at today. And everybody's going to be in different stages as part of that. David, anything else?
Well, I'd put it this way: empower. That's our first principle. Trust and verify. Govern in order to protect. And I think this is what it all comes down to. If you don't empower your businesses, your employees to use to kind of do these things, if you don't give them a process to be able to manage you with us, if you don't have a good governance model, you kind of but you open things up, you kind of open your door to chaos. I think it's that. Finding that healthy balance of enablement while trusting and verifying of what's going on.
Love it. Adding those in as we go. That's a great shout. Thanks, guys. Tom and Ron, I might skip over you guys just for a moment because we're running short on time. I wish we had 2 hours with you guys, because I think you have so succinctly clarified your advice right here, which is brilliant. Satish, do you maybe want to close this up just in a quick minute on your looking back again on your advice you give to your peers?
Yeah, so one thing which, based on our experience, learning, and the past experience as well, if I need to call out one point, in our experience, as early as you can define the entire governance process, that will help your developer, that will help yourself, and that will help your user as well. Based on our experience, as we have defined this governance process and the entire process before we start onboarding the bots and apps, this is helping us at a big way to keep the track to our users, who is using, what using, and how they're utilizing that and socializing that. So in my view, and based on our experience from Accenture side, defining this process as early as you can, that would be very helpful. Again, depends on your organization, the need and the internal process and requirement, but still I would count this as one of the biggest learning for us.
If I may, somebody asked a quick question just to close this out real quick, but on your guys' staffing model, correct me if I'm wrong, but Joe, you run Productivity Studio at Microsoft, where you then bring in Accenture and you work with David and our tenant admins and our IT department to make this happen. Over at Wiley, we've got Ron and Tom, who are the 2-man band that are absolutely just fantastic over there. And then Satish, how big is your team at Accenture that kind of runs this, or is it all you, man?
No, okay. So our team is like, I'm leading an engineering and deployment team. So we manage the entire team's infrastructure, which includes that team entire application, not only bots and apps. So we have our dedicated team members, like 2 guys in my team who is dedicatedly working on this stream. and they facilitate this entire conversation with the different group and all. So we are not like a big team just doing this. And again, as I called out earlier as well, we are not developer. We are not doing any kind of code development work. We are just managing this entire cycle of the product development and publish through that process. So it's like a two guys are dedicated, but overall that entire engineering team, which is like a member of 8 to 9 team members who manage this entire teams from engineering point of view.
Awesome. And Joe, we're just chatting on the side, but maybe you want to call out. You guys have 4 resources, is that right?
Yeah, 4 resources and then 2 FTEs, which are David and myself that oversee it with Avanade and Building Eye and Echo. So those are the 3 suppliers that help support different types of services that we provide.
Awesome. So you just heard from Accenture, you just heard from Microsoft, and then Ron and Tom, love what you guys do is it's you 2, but then you're always bringing on your coworkers as the partner. So based on each project, correct me if I'm wrong, that sort of determines your working group at the time.
That is correct.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Awesome. God, again, I wish we had hours with all of you guys. As much as I'd love to steal more of your time, but I want to be respectful. We're already 2 minutes over. Just a massive thanks to everybody, and whether you're watching this live or on YouTube later, we'll share these links out to everybody watching it live. We will put these links in the YouTube channel to help you get started. There's some great resources out there that you can leverage in order to kick off your own governance model, in addition to just listening to these legends that we spoke to today. But again, gents, thank you so much for the time. For those that are joining in, if you want to continue these types of discussions, we're actually going to start doing these monthly. We kicked them off in June. We're going to do them again in August, and then monthly thereafter. But we're calling them unleashing teams, whether these regular community calls where we'll discuss topics such as governance like this and other scenarios at organizations and how they're dealing with them in their organizations and how they're unleashing this experience with Microsoft Teams. So we'll again, that's a link right there to join, and we'll share this out to everybody. But again, massive thanks, gentlemen. Really appreciate your time. Love all your work, and I mean, it goes to show with the success you've all had in your organization how valuable it is what you're doing. So appreciate so much the time you spent with us today.
Thanks for hosting, Jace. Bon.
Thanks, Jace.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for the time, everybody. Take care. And Pawan, thanks so much for co-hosting, brother.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Ned.